3, 2, 1.
Here we go!
Hello, you amazing and wonderful Earthlings. I hope everyone is doing great and having an awesome day. So welcome to today's episode of Shifting the Paradigm, episode 10. That's so awesome. We've gotten really far. Before we are joined by today's guest, I just want to give you a couple of announcements. First, have you watched my new show, Mysteries with a History, yet? If not, you should check it out. Episode 2 was just on Wednesday, and the focus was on transmedium vehicles and unidentified submerged objects, also known as USOs. Second is, if you're not supporting me and this channel by being a Patreon member, you're missing out on a lot of cool interactive perks and benefits. There are 4 tiers of memberships available, and some of those perks, with just the basic tier 1, you're getting access to a private Discord chat server where you can chat with me and other supporters about this topic, access to audio files in both iPhone and Android formats of all the shows, and episodes to listen to on your own, and exclusive behind-the-scene video and photos, and also access to Shifting the Paradigm Extras, which is a bonus 15 minutes of questions and answers with all my guests for my Patreon supporters. Guys, that's just for tier 1. And that intro that I played, you can get that too with being a Patreon supporter. You should check out all of the tiers and see some amazing perks and benefits. Finally, I always try to get to your questions in the live chat, but it's difficult sometimes to keep track of who's asking what while also listening to the guest. So the best way to get your question to flash up brightly and colorful is by doing a super chat question, which I can see really easily. It also helps support my work and this channel. All right. So with all of that out of the way, let's introduce today's guest, Mr. 𝗔𝗶𝘀𝗰𝗹𝗶𝗺𝗏, also known as Alien Scientist.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Jeremy, how are you?
Good, good. How are you?
Good. Oh, can you put your volume up just a little bit? You're a little faint.
Check, check, check. How about now? Is that better?
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful.
Better, better.
Much better. So Jeremy has a Bachelor's of Science degree in physics from Bridgewater State and is an avid researcher and YouTuber who goes by the handle Alien Scientist. If you are not subscribed to his YouTube, you should. I'll put the link in the description box below because he already has over 100,000 followers. Jeremy is a skeptic with a cynical outlook on the current state of disclosure, believing that the government is much further ahead with their technology than they admit. On his website, alienscientist.com, and his YouTube channel, he dives deep on the history of government anti-gravity research, as well as other technologies thought to be related to government reverse engineering programs. Since 2008, he has worked on compiling information on these programs and exploring the physics and engineering problems associated with alternate propulsion physics research. And without further ado, here is our special guest, Jeremy. Yes.
Thanks, Christina. This is gonna be great.
Thank you. And you're doing so much right now. But let's get started by getting your perspective on what has transpired over the last few days, including the New York Times article related to the Pentagon UAP report. What are your thoughts on all of this?
It's right in line with pretty much what I predicted and said they were going to release. As far as it's just going to be basically a push for new funding and no disclosure or real information is going to come out. But I definitely think that the way that they're treating it is, I don't know. It's interesting to say, because it's opened up the conversation so much, and that this conversations are so much easier to have with people and talk about this topic. I've noticed, and that's been a huge improvement in shifting the paradigm. But to plug your channel,
Yes.
it's I think it's we need to like do more than that with the scientific community. And I don't know, it's just I just wish more was being done with how certain things are being portrayed and what information's being talked about in the mainstream. And I understand why that is, and why that could be, just because of how dangerous some of these technologies are and stuff. If you start digging into, the real nuts and bolts of some of these secret programs and stuff.
So then
So
if you were in control of the media and everything that's coming out to the public, what would you do? What would you give out?
I think it's just hard because they've lost so much credibility at this point. I almost feel like they're doing this to try to get some of their credibility back, because like it's like every no one trusts the mainstream media anymore, and everyone's like making and relying on alternative media and doing their own research, and which is great. And it's caused an upheaval with their ability to control narratives and control information. And I just think that a lot of different narratives are intended. I would bring more diverse opinions on, and not just the same group of people that are all connected to it. It just seems like in the mainstream, it's always like the same core group of people that are all connected to this, ancient. It's all the people that speak at Ancient Aliens Conference and at Alien Con and all these, and do all the alien shows, and are the typical, cast of, your regular usual suspects, I guess I would call them. So I would like to see more diverse opinions on, if it it were up to me, I'd like to see more people that honestly you didn't never think that they would ever show in the mainstream media, people like on the underground. So but yeah, I don't know, it's like I have three different opinions on this right now, and we're searching for, the
Hey,
we're always
Jeremy, I'm sorry to cut you off, but can you put your volume just a little bit higher? Just a little bit.
check. How about
Oh,
that? Let me just
that
make
sounds
sure.
good.
It wouldn't be a complete alien scientist show without some audio problem. And I just, yeah,
There's
always,
all technical difficulties all the time.
I
I
get
get it.
stuff like that takes me for a loop, right? So you start thinking you got all this stuff pegged with that it's all us and it's all our technologies and stuff. And then you get stuff that, that cases that just throw you for a loop. And it's like, man, these ones are really hard to explain as a skeptic, or in the scientific community. There are certain cases that I'd like to see more highlighted and talked about more. I don't know. I think I have my top three that I could mention, but these Russian UFO cases, the USO cases, I think are some of the most interesting. I stumbled upon this video just a few days ago, and it talks about technical data that I'd never heard before mentioned in the U.S. media or in any documentary about this, with releases from United States military personnel. But this Russian documentary, and I'm sharing the screen right now, and I don't know if I can post the link. I'll share it in the private chat. Maybe you can post a link in the description at
Mhm.
the end. But you're talking about USOs, and these things have been seen since the 1960s, and they apparently the submarines were running into them in a couple different spots. And I thought that was rather interesting, and they made these noises. They call them the croakers, like frogs, but it's a 𝗵𝗀𝗃𝗃. It's a weird Russian word, and I looked it up and I could find nothing on this. And
Mm.
they played some of the sounds in this documentary in the background, but I want like a pure audio recording of what these things sound like, so I can see them. And we got Tyler Rogaway of the Drive right on one side saying that this is all spoofing technology that they're able to create.
And for those that don't know the definition of spoofing, can you just kind of give a brief description, summary?
So there's something called electronic countermeasures, and it's basically, we have electronic countermeasures, which are radar. That's like our radar system, and that's an electronic countermeasure. So our countermeasure is to use electronics to detect whether ships or aircraft are coming, right? So that would be an ECM. And what you have is a study of a whole history of radar, if you go back into it. And Project Rainbow was the CIA's project that looked into this, but they basically were all about what they were doing at Area 51 for years. Is they'd find out information about what frequencies and all the statistics of the radar frequencies that Russian radar were using, and then they'd figure out how to counter it using those frequencies and return signals, and fake spoofing. Basically, they could record the signal coming from the Russian antenna and then replay back any signal they want into the feeder to give it any kind of information, to give it wrong information, basically. So they feed back on the radar. So the radar looks out and it sees all this stuff, and then the data it gets back, it tells them that there's a thing traveling at 80,000 miles an hour. So, when skeptics like me who know stuff about those technologies see the radar data that people throw out there, and they're like, "What, this thing went this fast?" And it's like, well, how do you know it was a real thing? How do you know it wasn't one of these technologies that could have been used to spoof that? And they also have ability to create plasma balls that can talk, and shape-shifting plasmas in the air for use as non-lethal weapons. It's a psychological weapon for use in what's called psyops warfare.
Is this new, or when was this created?
I saw this in 2011 in Japan at a technologies fair. When they did a technologies fair in Japan, someone put out a video on this technology in 2011. So I know that the Japanese have a company that's been working on it and developing this since at least then. But I don't know how long ago that the U.S.'s capabilities go back. But I would imagine at least to that time period. There's no. I haven't really traced back any of the classified anything. I haven't got any classified programs or anything declassified out of the U.S. military or stuff that they have as far as capabilities. But I know about some of their laser technologies and laser capabilities at the New Mexico Tech and SPAWAR and Naval Research Labs. But anyways, that's besides the point. It's basically like you have these technologies that could basically fake these things, and they date back. And I don't know how. Yeah, it would be good to like figure out how far those date back so you can figure out things like that. But you have cases like these Russian sailors who and the whole crew says that this USO appeared underneath their submarine, and it shone a light through the submarine, like you shine a light through your hand. It's so bright.
I've seen a lot of stories, I heard a lot of stories. Quickly want to say thank you so much, Luis Jimenez from the Unidentified Celebrity Review. Go subscribe to his channel. He's posting stuff every single day. And thank you so much for the super chat. Please continue, Jeremy.
Yes, that's awesome. Hey, thanks. And hey, Louis, I should be watching the chat too. Hey, Chris Spaghetti and Rather Be Squidding and a bunch of other friends of mine that I recognize in the audience. But yeah, these cases like this, which date back, which kind of predate some of these technologies, are much harder to explain. And then you have the circling light cases, and that go back. Apparently, they mention them in this, and they talk about the sailors. And that they go back centuries, that they found tales from like centuries old sailors' tales about seeing these kinds of lights and these things in the water.
And as a skeptic, what would be your how would you rationalize that the lights that they see?
They already talked about so many avenues that they took, and they searched the whole water for bioluminescent plankton and found no traces of anything in the water that could naturally be producing the light or organically. Maybe it's some type of you think about natural phenomenon that kind of look like this, the northern lights maybe, but no. it's very hard to explain this kind of stuff for as a skeptic and as a scientist, and that's the kind of stuff that stuck out to me, and that's why I'm bringing it up, because I don't have explanations for this stuff, man. It'd be a boring show if I showed a bunch of stuff that I can explain. You
Well,
know, I'm
I
kind of
want
trying to mix the two, you know, with the technology. Some of the stuff we can explain in terms of technologies that are being declassified, but then some of the stuff, it's like, wait a minute. So go ahead.
where in your opinion is all of this heading? Everything that you're talking about, but also the 180-day report. What are you expecting from it?
Well, they did mention, right? They did mention the idea of hypersonic, you know, foreign drones, that it could be foreign technology. If our Pentagon and they are telling the truth, that they really can identify these things and they don't know what they are. If they're not from our own military, you know, testing things, and know that they sometimes our military tests things on itself, you know, in secret, and doesn't, you know, that it comes out later that, oh, well, that was us testing this new technology on ourselves. So I'm wondering, that might be the case, but I know that there have been developing these hypersonic supercavitating torpedoes and supercavitating transatmospheric craft and technologies, and they've been developing that since the 1990s. It started out of a think tank, I would call it, at Rensselaer Polytechnical Institute, and branched out from there. And I have all the books and literature on this as well. If anyone is interested, they can email me at thealienscientist@gmail.com and get some more information. We have conferences where we talk about this stuff too, and try to, you know, see where the physics went, because it is going in the future, because you find a lot of stuff in here that overlaps. So you get stuff in here about these types of material coatings that they're using to produce these types of new lasers that they're using to vaporize the air in front of these craft to create this supercavitated opening, or, you know, it basically pushes all the water or air out away from, and creates a vacuum in front of the craft for the craft to fly through. So it doesn't slow down. It doesn't have wave effects or drag effects, and it's super laminar flow, and it just goes through anything.
So then what are your thoughts and theories on the videos released by Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, like the thermal footage and the radar footage?
You know, it's interesting. I'm wondering how they obtain that footage. It still isn't clear, you know, why the Pentagon is leaking this stuff to George Knapp and, you know, using them as their conduit to get the information out. But none of those all those videos, it seems like it almost like looks to me like a straw man, because none of it is convincing the scientific community from what I've seen. It's keeping the conversation. It's basically, this is the conversation that we've had since the 1950s on UFOs, and it's trying to keep the conversation in that, and keep the narrative in that limited frame of, you know, just things in the sky that we can't explain. And that's the main thing I have a problem with, because I think that our science and our technology has gotten beyond that, but we've lost touch with a lot of this stuff. And I really think that even our scientists aren't paying attention, because it's mixed up with all this taboo stuff and all this nonsense, and they don't want to get involved with that because it's a detriment to their career or anything in the future that they want to do. But at the same time, it's like, where we need to go in the future is this kind of technology and these kind of craft. So it's hard for me to figure out, you know, a way to break through this paradigm. And when I see what's going on in the mainstream media, I have a different outlook on it and take on it. Than, you know, it's opening the conversation in some avenues with certain people, but I feel like it's closing the important conversations that I feel like these scientists need to be having, in regards to that we have technologies that can replace aircraft and airplanes, and they can mimic things like UFOs. I don't know yet that it goes to this capability, but there's an idea here that if you can get enough, if you can trap light and trap enough of it in a condensed energy in a small enough area, you could essentially shut off inertia. And there's a bunch of papers on this that go back to, you know, the 1990s, and research that was done by Lockheed Martin, Skunk Works, by a physicist named Dr. 𝗵𝗏𝗧𝗔𝗧𝗃. And I mean, all this stuff, and then you get into, 𝗵𝗏𝗧𝗃 worked with 𝗗𝗶𝘀𝗃𝗧𝗃, who came out with that stuff in 2018. 𝗗𝗶𝘀𝗃𝗧𝗃 is, of course, the lead scientist for TTSA, and they said they were going to build a craft, and this technology was going to come out. And he gave this one presentation, which wasn't well publicized, and they never really, put it on their channel on YouTube or talked much about this. But he referenced this one paper called on terahertz perspectives of left-handed metamaterials and anisotropic media, and it led me to a bunch of interesting information on research that is being done on terahertz by the U.S. military, and that was by Viktor Podolsky. I'll share that in the private chat as well. I have all these links and stuff. I'll send them to you. But this is like the best of the best where physics could be going in the future, because this could be, warp drive technology that is being, and it could be used by something that's been here for a long time and known about this technology, or it could be of something that's, from outside this planet, so that's the big debate here, is like, what's the, if we don't know what these things are, and they're not our top secret craft, then what the heck are they? So,
well, John has a question, and he says, what are the best reasons government of the world has for hiding the 0-point energy tech, upending financial industry, religious security threats, or global panic, or pure selfish greed to keep reverse engineering tech to themselves? Thank you so much, John.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the history of the intelligence community, it's always, the OSS was referred to as oh so special, because it was just a bunch of rich kids that were, given this position of the, we're going to give all the intelligence to the rich people, and what are they going to do with that intelligence? They're going to use it to protect their assets and basically protect themselves. And that's kind of what's been going on in the last 70 years in the intelligence community, is a bunch of rich people protecting their own assets.
Both.
But and it's led to disastrous results with it, and it's led to a lot of the crises that the current intelligence community has inherited from their ancestors, and the messes that they have to clean up and of course deal with, and the trust issues with the public. So I think that there's definitely things that need to be changed, but I think that this narrative that's coming out now is trying to wash all that stuff of the past and really bury Roswell. It's trying to say, well, there's a whole bunch of disinformation, and they're going to try to bury Roswell and these crash recovery programs along with that stuff. And I think that I really believe that there's more to that. I've tried to debunk it for years and looked into so much of this stuff. I mean, we had Lou Elizondo coming out with that Adams project. He had that material, which he said was recovered UFO debris, and they were going to analyze it, and then they signed that Army CRADA, gave it to the military, and I really felt like that was like, well, they're giving it back to the military, and then they're going to use this as like, so the source can go back to Linda Moulton Howe, and it doesn't have to go back to, craft that they, kept hidden from the public for 70 plus years. And that would, of course, lead to a lot more questions and culpability. And I think it's easier to give people a soft disclosure in this way, just to test the waters and see if we're ready for it. But at the same time, soft disclosure, it's like not disclosure at all, because it's burning it out in the news cycle with fake stuff. So when they do the real disclosure, it's not going to hit as hard. And I mean, maybe that's the whole idea. Maybe that's what they're doing, is softening us all up, so that when the real disclosure hits, it's not going to be like this big shock that, oh my God, we do have, there could be things from other, civilizations. And yeah, the military might be hiding it because it's for, what they perceived as our own good. And the rich people who run the intelligence community and make those decisions on what intelligence, like 0-point energy and things like that should remain classified, I believe are, influenced by protecting their own assets. And that's what it's become about. And that's going to destroy the planet. It's going to destroy it's not only going to ruin everything that you have now as you're in your accumulated wealth that your families, these rich, Illuminati families have accumulated for decades and decades. It's going to shun all of humanity because, we could be using that technology. But at the same time, they feel like they're protecting humanity. There's the argument because we're all too, we're all too careless and stupid and reckless, and who knows what if terrorists got that hold of that technology and stuff, and they don't understand that the whole system that they perpetuate creates the terrorists. And it's so it's this just giant mess, man. It's just like, I feel like
it. It sounds like it. But I want to turn directions towards your work and your research. Looking at your website, alienscientist.com, you say that you have a long history of research and an investigation into advanced propulsion concepts. Can you elaborate on what research you have done and what results you have achieved?
So we tried Podclinic impulse gravity generator experiment. We tried sending, voltage through a superconductor. We tried some experiments with we'd built lifters for all the 𝗵𝗀𝗀𝗏 stuff, for Frollov's hat, a number of different variations of, 𝗵𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗏-like devices. We're working on a replication of the Mark McCandlish ARV, or Alien Reproduction Vehicle, and along with a couple other replications of. We basically go out there and find every claim that's ever been, out there of anti-gravity and try to replicate some of the research. We've got David 𝗗𝗏𝗀𝗃𝗏𝗏's Boeing research that he tried to do with spin atomic resonance and nuclear magnetic resonance and electromagnetic EPR and NMR and EPR, electromagnetic pulse
Thank you.
response.
Quickly want to say, Greg.com, thank you so much for the airdrop for ramen and ice cream after the show. Obviously be eating ice cream. I know I got a lot of hate for eating Cherry Garcia on the girl chat we had, but I'll probably be eating that tonight. So I really, really want to say thank you so much.
Yeah, so there's so much to talk about. People want me to talk about terahertz. People want me to talk about Mark McCandlish a little bit. So yeah, Mark McCandlish he recently died. There was a whole conspiracy surrounding his death because it was a suspicious suicide according to a lot of people. And we, as in myself, Michael Schratt, and Stephen Cambian, performed an investigation into that, just because there were a lot of rumors going around about whether he was suicided by the government. And there was even Kerry Cassidy of Project Camelot published an article saying that he was scheduled to testify before hearings to this UAP task force, and that wasn't true. There wasn't any hearings, and that was a whole other case. But we interviewed Mark in December of 2020 last year. So and that interview is available on my channel if anyone's interested in diving into basically the culmination of his work, which a lot of the stuff you'll find is decades old now. But we got him finally to present before a conference of engineers and got to hit him with a whole bunch of really detailed technical questions in the Q&A. So it's the best interview out there that I could have asked for.
So based on your research and your scientific knowledge of propulsion, what are these crafts that are being observed by our naval pilots and trained observers, in your opinion, like their behavior and propulsion? What is your perspective on them?
I mean, each case there are individual cases that could be a little bit different. And each one, each case should be evaluated, individually at its.
Absolutely.
Because there are a lot of cases that could be explainable, but that doesn't mean all of them are explainable in the same way or with the same,
So then do you believe them to be man-made, like our own technology?
I have tried to, forward that hypothesis and explain away, that's the easy answer, right? So you have levels of the hardness of the answers, right? Aliens is like the most open-ended. It's like the easiest answer, but it's also the hardest answer to prove, right? It's the easiest answer to, it's the easiest hypothesis to make, but it's the hardest to turn into a valid theory or a valid,
Right. It's hard to
established.
test.
Yes, and it's hard to test as well. So we can go with so my research has also been around just human technologies, because even if it is alien technology, we could figure that out too and make that human technology, and that would be great as well. And that's what we're also after. That's part of this. That's the dream. That's what we're hoping for, is that these things aren't all man-made, and that some of them are in fact some really, really super advanced stuff that we're yet to figure out, and that we can someday figure that stuff out and leave this planet and travel among the stars.
That'd be amazing. So how about giving us, a valid scenario on how on who would be flying these things, and why would they be buzzing on our ground and our military assets?
So I think if it's so T.D. Barnes was asked this question, what did he think of these things? What are these recent UAP reports? And he mentioned Project Palladium and Project Nemesis, which are, of course, the two programs, the CIA balloon projects that were mentioned in that article by Tyler Rogaway on the War Zone that I showed earlier. And those balloons have like it was a circle balloon with a cube in the middle of the balloon, which was interestingly reported by some of those pilots that saw these things. So he talks about that, but basically they can take one balloon and then they deflate it and simultaneously inflate another one 80,000 miles away, so it can give the radar spoof it spoofs the radar into thinking that that one single object physically moved from one point to the other, when it's in fact two different objects so it gives the illusion of teleporting. They deflate one and simultaneously inflate the other one. So they've done stuff like that. Then that in combination with this sort of SDI lightcraft technology, they have these lasers that can shoot microwaves that ionize the air, as I mentioned, that they can create plasma balls and patterns in the air, but they can also do those things next to objects and use that to kind of move they ionize, and it explodes the air ionized they can push objects around, like balloons especially. They're really lightweight, and they're easy to push around with a little impulse of blasted ionized air with a laser pulse. So you can move these balloons around with lasers, and by combining these two technologies, and then of course if you combine it with some sort of surface controls and other things, you could fly these things around potentially and make them look and perform maneuvers that were seemingly unexplainable. So I don't know. I try to think about outside the box about, combine these technologies and think about all this stuff and combine. But yeah, that's what T.D. Barnes said when he was asked about this. He talked specifically about Nemesis and Project Palladium and what these projects might have, morphed into in the 20 years since he left Area 51 and retired. So it makes you think. So it's definitely some stuff to check out. Alternative hypotheses.
It's a lot to think about, and I like the fact that you brought up secret projects altogether, because something on your front page on your website is related to the research, the TR3B Astra, the Aurora project, and flying triangles that was just published a few weeks ago by you. Can you talk about that and elaborate on what those are?
I've been investigating that TR3B since 2004 when I started making videos on it, and then I met the guy who started the whole story.
Can you summarize what that is, like for people that might not know?
So this TR3B rumor was started by this guy Ed Fouché in 1998, and it's he said that there was these flying triangles that were spotted in the Belgian wave and in other waves of sightings of flying triangular craft with the three red lights and the three white lights, or three red lights and one white light in the middle, or one red light in the middle, or vice versa. But anyways, there was a lot of these sightings of these triangles, and he came out in 1998 and said that he was an ex-military employee at Area 51, and that this was a U.S. Air Force craft as part of the Aurora project, and it was called the TR-3B. And he talked a lot about ECCMs, those electronic countermeasures, and radar tech and some of that stuff that was going on. So we know a lot of that was stuff that was going on out at Area 51 at the time, real stuff. So it's possible that he mixed the real stuff in with disinformation, and we always try to get down to this because there's no hard evidence of any contractor. There's no patents. There's a bunch of stuff on the Astra program and also the Aurora project, and that took place at Aurora Air Force Base in Buckley, Colorado, and a lot of interesting stuff that we dug up and could find. But T said that the TR doesn't stand for tactical reconnaissance like most TR aircraft. TR stands for tactical reconnaissance, but he claimed that in this instance it stood for the manufacturer, and that we said, is it Teledyne Ryan, because that's the only TR we could think of or that we could come up with for as far as aircraft contractors. So we did a ton of research into that case and a number of other cases that he had referred us to over the years and stuff. And then so that was the whole Ed Fouché thing, and we still don't know what's going on with him. He died a couple of years ago, and we still, I mean, I had a video that I put out that was that I probably should talk about and clarify, because I got to play the whole thing. We want to release the whole thing, but man, Ed Fouché, he's so drunk in it, and in this one part of the video, he said that he said that he was a lion. I said, I'm a lion, mother, blah 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 blah, and and I'll tell him I made the whole thing up, and that video got out, and a lot of people use that as a ways to debunk him and stuff. And
Wow.
I don't know. It's like, it's not
That's
completely
intense.
debunked, but also there's no evidence of the TR-3B exists, so you can't vindicate him until the Air Force rolls this thing out. Of course, people make arguments that they never will because it was nuclear powered and that violated treaties and international treaties on nuclear powered aircraft and nukes in space, and this is whole thing about it. But
That's
that seems a little
bizarre.
bit, it seems a little bizarre and ridiculous. And of course, the propulsion system is something we've looked into, because that's the most important part. And he gave an interesting description. He said it was rotating liquid mercury plasma, and that it was super cooled and spun at like ridiculously high speeds. And
Well, I wanted, so Mark had a question, and he said, alien scientist, is our power systems the biggest limiting factor in these technologies?
The power systems, right now, yes, that was one factor that was identified by the intelligence professionals who examined these cases and these UFOs. They said, well, we even the Russians, we considered the idea that these were some kind of technology, and it's as if all the systems in the world, they said the amount of money that they'd have to spend to create this and be that far advanced, that it would be all the money in the world combined for years and years to produce these things. So if they are real physical craft and they're sitting there and hovering for up to 12 hours at a time, right? They're not drones, because the best drones we have like what like an hour battery time, tops.
Right, it's not much.
Maybe they're something is what's powering them. That's the biggest question. Yes, from a physics standpoint, and it's been identified in a number of the scientists that have. I think it's an important argument. So if you're going to talk to scientists about these things, this is a key point to bring up to them: is what are they using in terms of energy, and where is the energy coming from that can allow this thing to hover there and glow at incredible luminosities for 12 hours straight?
Well, then that leads to another question, because Sean Logan has a question, and he says, Sean Cahill said that the TikTok was giving off gamma rays. What could cause that?
So you want to know, I'll tell you what could cause it. So there's something called the hafnium controversy. And if the shell of this thing's made out of, was it tantalum or hafnium? Tantalum hafnium is right there on the periodic table. There's a certain isomer of tantalum and that will create a stable gamma ray laser. And that was basically as part of Edward Teller talked about this, and it was in some of these patents that go back to the the hydrogen bomb, because the inside of the cavity of the hydrogen bomb, in order to create that cavity where they can fuse hydrogen and create a hydrogen fusion bomb, they needed to create a gamma ray laser and sustainable gamma ray like refractory. And they use these refractory metals, hafnium, to build this gamma ray laser, because it can literally reflect gamma rays.
Wow.
And there's a whole thing you can look up. It's called the hafnium controversy. If you look this up, it's one of the most hardest metals to get a hold of, and if you try to buy it, or they'll track you, and for sure. So
oh my gosh.
yeah, but the gamma ray lasers and stuff that could be giving off gamma ray energies, that's the only thing that I've read of in the literature or know about that produces gamma rays like on that. So gamma is huge energy. That's really high on the electromagnetic spectrum scale. So that's gammas can simultaneously produce matter out of the vacuum. That's how much energy is in it. It can produce electron-positron pairs.
Oh wow.
So it can.
Well, people in the live chat are having such fantastic questions. John has another question, and he says, Christina, what does he think about the reports of UFOs very similar to the current events that were seen in the 1930s and 1920s? Great question.
I think, this is why I dabble. I kind of sit on the fence between the hypothesis that these are all, all these cases are explainable in terms of our own technology. Because of that, how do you explain that some of these things go back years, and then even if it is our own technology, how do you what was bright enough to shine through the hull of a submarine and illuminate, from the bottom of the ocean, and fly and go underneath these subs? And even if it's these Project Palladium balloons flying around, which, I share that with everyone so that they're aware of that. But, some of that can't always, I admit, it can't always explain some of these things that are seen. Not all of the, I really hope that it's other technology. I really hope that it's aliens, and that it's some really interesting 0-point energy technology that we just don't know about, but we could still figure out and unlock in our laboratory if we just stumbled across the right physics. But
so, well, I want to say quickly that for people that are going to be watching this on replay, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so that you can ask questions when they happen live. Do not miss these lives, because this will be one of the best opportunities to be asking experts, such as alien scientists, the questions that you want to ask. And we have another question by Greg.com, and he says, late to the party, so not sure if this has been covered, but what are you guys taking on the NASA guys replay to the UAP question the other day? Did you happen to watch that?
I haven't seen that, so I don't know. What was the NASA's scientist's name? I want to go look that up and check that out. That would be definitely something I'd like to see, because it's good for people are paying attention to what scientists are saying and the science community's reaction to this, and learning from that, and about how to approach these people and how to push that conversation in the right direction. I did see Mick West's interview on Dr. Brian Keaton's channel the other day.
Yeah.
So that was, so that's, it's interesting, because I was trying to get Brian Keaton to interview me, because I wanted to talk to him more about these physics and some of this stuff outside the box. And he chose to interview Mick West on this stuff instead. So I thought that maybe, who knows, he still might get in for a talk with me. He said he's busy and booked for the next month and a half or two, but he might be able to get on my show again.
Oh, that'll be exciting. That'll be exciting. The scientist that had the question was Bill Nelson, by the way. But I hope that interview happens with you. That sounds great.
Yes, it's important. We need to approach the scientific community with the right conversations,
and the right questions,
and not put too much pressure on them for answers, because remember the stigma, and remember that there's a cover up and an ongoing psychological operation by the intelligence community to convince smart people that it's smart to think this stuff's nonsense, and that they put the most nonsense stuff out there front and center. And like I think I call it the straw man tactic, and then they Mick West comes in and debunks it all, and then the scientific community can say, oh, well, that's, you know, it's all nonsense, and they won't look into the real stuff when that comes along, because it's already burnt out in the news cycle, and their attention
Oh,
span
yeah.
and
And
tolerance for it is
oh no, and I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to say the scientist. I meant to say senator. And then when you're talking about scientists, I'm like,
senators.
oh my gosh, my bad. I missaid it. But it's Senator Bill Nelson. Please forgive me.
Senator Bill Nelson. What's the NASA
Senator.
scientist? What was the NASA scientist's name? I wanted to look that up too. So
Well, I have the replay on my channel if you want to take a look at it. For anyone that's interested in that NASA video, it is on my channel. I think it's the recent one, so take a look at that. I'll put the link in the description box below later today. So something that you are familiar with is the software ability to fake UFO sightings with CGI and visual effects. You know, I'm also pretty familiar with advanced software for generating such things. And as a result, I've spent a year, guys. I spent a year examining and analyzing public UFO sighting videos from my channel. For those that are just here for Shifting the Paradigm, take a look at my older videos where I analyze, enhance all types of UFO sighting videos. So about 1% of what I observed to seem to be a hoax, you know, with CGI to me, but 9 out of 10 times the objects recorded seemed like cases of misidentification, but it is increasingly difficult to tell what is real and what isn't for sure, and especially now with all the technology that we have. But obviously, you know, with us enthusiasts, we haven't given up hope. I haven't given up hope. So something that you said on your website, and I quote, it says, ufology is dead, and that you have stopped looking for answers in this field. Can you give us a good understanding of your position with this?
Oh yeah, I stopped looking into UFOs like, I don't know, a couple years back, and it was like at the height of all the CGI and drones and CGI. I said, like, between all this stuff, it's like, and what we know about invisibility technology, because that was my key argument to the why ufology is pretty much is dead to me anyways. It's not a field of science that it's also dead to science, and I don't think that the scientists are really looking into UFOs or thinking of, they're not interested in videos or in analysis thereof, right? That's just a whole, you know, it's speculation and nonsense. We're interested in scientific answers, and where we're at right now in physics is that we understand that there's a gap between gravity and quantum mechanics, and how do we fill that is with an understanding of quantum gravity and a theory of quantum gravity. And that's sort of where physics is pushing towards in terms of, you know, its edge of understanding. So the way we understand light and these things is we can make things invisible using metamaterials and using optical materials that bend the light around objects and do different things with that light. But there's also this whole idea that the structure of light itself is what gives the fabric of space-time and reality its geometry, and that if we bend the light and squeeze light and do weird things with it, like trap large amounts of it and squeeze it, and we can basically warp space-time itself and move around. That's the whole physics theory that I've found a lot of interesting papers on and been pursuing for the last, I think, 3-4 years,
Wow.
really heavily. And we've gotten a whole bunch of scientists that have been related to this research to kind of group up and talk well, they were talking originally at Estes Park Conference was the first one to do it. They James Woodward of the Woodward effect. He was they hold a conference called the Estes Park Conference, where they get all these propulsion physicists together to talk about how to build the next generation of spaceships. And they had it because of COVID. They had it on Zoom, and we said, "Wow, this is such a great idea." I recorded a lot of those presentations, and I've reposted a couple of the good ones on my channel that I've had permission to repost and stuff. But that gave us this idea that, man, we could hold our own conference, because this Zoom the technology's here and everyone has, you know, the ability to do this. So we started holding this Apec conference. We got Tim Ventura to be the host of it all, and we put
Wow.
we helped them put a website together, and then we're going around recruiting all the scientists who worked on this stuff or that ever, talked about, including Mark McCandlish and a lot of these other guys, and then we bring them on a conference with a whole bunch of technicians, and we have a team where we try to replicate their experiments and build this stuff, and that's sort of the direction I feel like this needs to go next. And I feel like it's almost like a cargo cult. I feel like these primitive humans trying to replicate really advanced technology, but we have this insight into it, and that's where I said the ufology is dead, is that you're not going to get anything from a video. You need microscopes, electron microscopes. Like we've looked at the pieces that 𝗔𝗧𝗧𝗘𝗡𝗧𝗏 has of these UFO pieces that he's brought into Dr. Gary Nolan's lab. That was in the Phenomenon movie by James Fox.
Yeah, great film.
This is where we're going to understand the technology and get to understand how this stuff actually works in two-dimensional graphene layered technologies, and understanding the physics of liquid light, because I went from this whole idea of, and I think this is where the technology really went, from rotating mercury plasmas, right, in the Nazi Bell, and from the 40s through the 60s and whatever, the TR3B in the 80s or whatever that was, right? So that's the first generation of it. The second generation was maybe rotating superfluids or superconductors, and that sort of generation. There might be some overlap there with with what mercury does at different temperatures, but then at the ultimate end of this is trapped light, and where it's liquid light that they're rotating, and it's a whole level of new physics involved in that. And
Zofa has a question. Thank you, by the way. And they say, dust in a plasma can form structures and bacteria that feed directly on electricity. So one day our tech could be very exotic, shape-shifting. What are your thoughts on that?
I've never heard of bacteria that can live in plasma. I mean, talk about extremophiles. I know that there are extremophiles that live in some pretty harsh environments, but a plasma, that seems I would love to see a link on that and to learn more about where I can find these bacteria and learn more about them. But I think that maybe I mean, biology is a weird subject, right?
It
Because
is.
we're really fragile. Like, that's why a lot of these things we're saying that they're probably unmanned vehicles because of the 90-degree turns and the G forces that these things would have to undergo. It's like there's no way a human pilot could survive that unless they had inertial cancellation technology that was somehow removing all the inertia from the so that the occupant was immune to inertia and could take 90-degree turns at breakneck speed without turning into jelly. But yeah, human biological organisms are inherently very fragile, and we're talking about technologies that are I don't know. So
well, Exofa always has really good commentary and or questions, so I love to have them in because they just give such great thoughts on it. Athena the poop awesome name, thank you so much, that's so funny. Right. So, you're also the CEO of an organization called Hover Brothers. Can you tell us about that? Like, what kind of work? What kind of work is it? What's the mission? And what part do you play in it?
So we started Hover Brothers in like 2018. It was right after TTSA came out, and they said that they were going to build a craft, and they were trying to raise money and funds to build a craft. And
Like, what kind of craft?
they want to build a warp drive craft, like anti-gravity, and they brought that. Remember, he went on Joe Rogan. Tom DeLonge went on Joe Rogan and had that. He said he was saying that they had that piece of metal and you hit it with the terahertz and it floats, and that they were going to build a craft. And I kind of laughed at that at the time because I hadn't known the whole scope of that research and what he was talking about there and stuff. But I said, like, and he didn't mention he went right to that stuff, and it didn't like mention any of the other anti-gravity stuff and that I had been researching, and that, you know, I'd been part of this community for decades. And so, you know, I had been in this for decades, researching a lot of this stuff, and I was like, you know, well, if these guys claim that they're going to build a craft, we could do the same thing. So I started my own company to sort of compete with them, and to like,
Wow.
you know, also to, you know, competition to push them, you know, to, because I was like, they're not talking enough about the science. They got all these guys like 𝗔𝗧𝗧𝗘𝗡𝗧𝗏 and 𝗷𝗶𝘀𝗀𝗏, and I know these guys have written amazing papers, and why aren't they giving interviews? Why aren't they responding to emails? Why aren't they, you know, engaging with the public and being, you know, open to disclosure if this is really what they're about? And so, like, I was all about disclosure at the time. I didn't know as much as I know now about what they were talking about in terms of that technology and the fundamentals of it. But again, it's something that's interesting and should be explored, but it's also very costly and expensive to build those types of materials to do the research that's needed on those types of things. But there are a lot of labs around the world that are doing research on these types of terahertz and left-handed terahertz materials.
So then what specifically is your mission? Because, I mean, is it disclosure or what?
So yes, it's disclosure, but it's forced disclosure through experiment and through, you know, if this is real, then we're going to be able to perform an experiment that can be replicated and using science to force disclosure, and also using just you know, history. I found a lot of disclosure like has already happened, like things that came out or were declassified that just people don't know about. They didn't pay attention to them. They're really complicated things that were never really broken down or explained well. And you know, I struggle to explain some of them too sometimes and put it all together. But I wanted to create an archive for all this stuff because I would do research on this stuff, and if I didn't save it, some of this stuff will disappear. I noticed lots of this stuff just disappears. It just goes into a black hole and then it's just gone. And you're like, well, I can't find that anymore. Where are the links? And you search every word that you once, you know, brought up 10 dozen links, and they're all gone. And so, like, I started archiving and saving this stuff, and then I linked up with a number of other people that have been doing the same, and we combined all of our files, and now we have I believe the largest database on this stuff that exists anywhere in the public domain, including Michael Schratt, who's I call data himself, and he's got the biggest archive of UFO files and literature and UFO cases of anywhere. And so we're just, you know, some of it's about preserving the information, and then, you know, I've noticed that that's what they do is they repeat a lot of the stuff because, you know, and that's what I've had to do. I noticed Twitter is a lot about that. I'll get the most likes on a tweet that it's like my third time posting a variation of that tweet, because it's the information has to sink in before people like, oh, you know, this is you know, what's going on with this. Because the first time they just glance at the headline, and then it won't be till the third time that they actually read the article and start, you know, absorbing the information and stuff. So it's a battle. It's an uphill battle at the disclosure, and, you know, battling a lot of false information, because sometimes you feel like you've got something
Oh,
and it's
absolutely.
huge, and then it's like, it's a big letdown when people aren't more enthusiastic about it, and you realize that there's just so much more out there all the time, you know. And
No, we just so many things that we don't understand. Trevor's going to have the last question of this live cast, and he says, if you take the honeycomb, hollow earth, etc. theories, does he believe that these UFO UAPs could be drone-like crafts sent to above ground to monitor us, like what we do to the oceans and space?
you know, why would they stop at monitoring us? Why wouldn't they like tell us to knock it off, or, you know, whatever it is it wants to be secretive and doesn't want to be known about it. You know, is it Nazis at a base in Antarctica? You know, there's all kinds of theories, man. I mean, it's great if you have a hypothesis for, you know, and you think over what you think these things are. I think that you should come up with ways to be skeptical of yourself and your hypothesis and test your hypothesis, and that's the only way you're going to be able to prove your hypothesis true to yourself and to others is to think skeptically and test it. Well, how could we test that?
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
one idea, right, is to find these remote places of the planet and set up, set up web streams, live streams that just record everything, like a secret camera that just records everything, and then, but also we need better sensors and better data too. But then you get into this whole idea, as soon as you build the radar system or the data detection, whether it's a camera, or a radar that you put out, they know it's there, and they start messing with you and doing counter, ECCMs again to your device, so they could turn invisible, so your frequency of camera doesn't see them, or the frame rate, so the frame rate doesn't see, or whatever. They'll figure it out. I just feel like
Yeah, they'll figure it out. Yeah, I hope so. At least I hope so.
It's like we're ants trying to figure out how to, look beyond the glass of our ant farm. So.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, thanks, April. Thank you so much. Hey, so we have run out of time for this episode. Thank you, Jeremy, for being with us today. It's been awesome. You dropped some really cool information. Can you please tell everyone where they can find you on social media?
So I'm _scientist at _scientist on Twitter, and you can find me on YouTube if you search for Alien Scientists, and of course alienscientist.com. And if you can reach me on my website, or on also on Facebook, Alien Scientist. So check me out, and if I'm open, my inbox is open if you have questions or are looking for specific information.
And all of
Fire
his
away.
links will be in the description box below. So take a look at that. So I want to thank Jeremy again, but for all of those who are supporting me on Patreon, we're going to be recording another 15-minute segment of Q&A, and it will be posted along with the audio files on this show later this evening. So if you love the show and want to help support this and other projects of my channel, click on the link below and have a look through the tiers of the Patreon support. Guys, I'm not joking. You're going to get some really good perks and benefits. I put a lot of thought into what I'm giving you guys. So I do want to thank all of my supporters: Ali Al, Big Sky Mountains, Dean Stein, John Russell, Michael Mataluni. Go subscribe to his channel at the Singularity Lab, Aaron Desario, and all of my supporters. Thank you so much. So take care, everyone. Be safe, and always keep your eyes on the skies.